Hey there, I'm Cory Driver, and this is Moving Forward. So this week we are in Song of Songs 2, Mark 7, and a little bit of James 1. And we're talking about freedom and moving towards freedom. And as a necessary component of moving towards freedom, escaping constructs and ideas that bind and prevent freedom. So the first enclosure that is preventing freedom is Solomon's palace. There are lots of ways to interpret Song of Songs, not Song of Solomon, but Song of Songs, and I follow the interpretive tradition that sees this as a love triangle. So there is a virtuous shepherd, the beloved, and then Solomon, who captures the beloved and imprisons her. And so the shepherd, the lover, is trying to free her and calling her to freedom. We see that in this passage that the shepherd comes down from the mountains and finds the beloved. She's trapped. She's trapped behind a wall. And so the shepherd is trying to look through lattice work, trying to look through the window to see her, and calls on her to escape back to the land that they used to enjoy together, and describes the bounty of the land. And she eventually will make at least one, but probably two, escape attempts to try to get back to the land and her shepherd lover. She is imprisoned in a castle. Now the palace is not bad in and of itself, right? People live there, it's okay. However, the palace becomes very bad when it is used for keeping a young woman in a harem that she does not want to be a part of. She wants to escape, and so she will try to escape. And just as the palace that is not necessarily good or bad in and of itself, but it is used to trap somebody and therefore it needs to be escaped, so Jesus also talks about human traditions, which are not good or bad, but it is used to trap somebody and therefore it needs to be escaped. Now, as even my young sons will tell you, washing your hands is a good idea. Please do that, always. But especially in the middle of the pandemic, it's a good idea, just wash your hands. There's your PSA. Washing hands is not a bad idea, and some Pharisees come to Jesus and ask him why some of his disciples do not wash their hands. Jesus' response is a little bit out of proportion, it seems like. Jesus kind of lights into this, but we don't really understand at first glance the seriousness of the issue at hand. You need to know that Jesus hung out with and ate with, importantly, Pharisees. He is part of a Pharisaic dialogue. Now, Pharisees are the radical equalizers of the ancient world. They get a bad rap in Christian circles, and I think that that's very problematic, and I'm going to go ahead and say anti-Semitic. Pharisees are the good guys in the Second Temple world. When we know that, because Jesus hangs out with them. We'll hear more about that in a second. But Pharisees are the radical equalizers. When so much of the concern is based on priests and the temple servants and who's doing what in the temple, the Pharisees say, no. The rules for priestly cleanliness, for how to be if you are going to encounter God, that applies to the whole nation. It's not just about priests. It is about all of us need to be ready to encounter God at any moment. They say, look, it's not just the elites who need to do stuff. God cares about the lives of individual humans who are not going to go to the temple for a couple months, maybe not this year, maybe not ever, right? Like, God cares about what you do in your life. God pays attention to you. God loves you and wants you to do the right thing. And it is for this reason, this radical equality that the Pharisees are preaching, that they are popular. They are popular amongst the people, and Jesus hangs out with them a lot. Now, you also need to know that Jesus eats with the Pharisees. And a thing you need to know about the Pharisees is they care about ritual purity. So much so that they don't eat with people who aren't Pharisees because they would contaminate the rest of the group, right? If you want to join, come on, right? Like they're making converts. They'll go across the seas to make converts. Come on in, no problem. But if you are going to eat with us, you have to be one of us. The word that we get Pharisee from, parusim, are those who separate themselves. So they are separating themselves from everybody who's not a Pharisee, especially at mealtime. And so when the text tells us a few times that Jesus is eating with Pharisees, it is telling us that Jesus is a Pharisee, at least in the eyes of the Pharisees holding the meal, right? So Jesus is part of a Pharisaic discussion because he is a Pharisee. You need to know that. It's not optional, right? Jesus is a Pharisee, and so he's part of this discussion. And so as part of an ongoing Pharisaic conversation about how you be ritually pure, some people ask Jesus why some of his disciples, which isn't to say Jesus or all of the disciples, why some of the disciples don't wash their hands. They are trying to trap Jesus in a discussion about why aren't you obeying all our laws? All our rules to help people be ritually pure all the time. And Jesus explodes and says, why do you not honor your parents? Why are you neglecting God's laws? Jesus goes so far as to say, nothing that goes into a person makes them impure, but what comes out of their mouth is evil, and that makes them impure. Now, know, please, that these are two separate concepts, right? To be impure is to not necessarily to be evil or to be sinful, right? Like the woman who has an issue of bleeding for 12 years, she's ritually impure. She is not sinful. That is not sin. That's not about sin. If you come in contact with a corpse, somebody you love dies, you prepare their body for burial. You are ritually impure. That in no way is sinful. So the conversation thus far is about ritual purity and maintaining ritual purity. And Jesus ups the ante incredibly and says, evil coming out of people makes them ritually impure, not just washing hands. And so Jesus is just rocketing up the tension of this conversation here to say, oh, you care about impurity? Well, let's talk about evil. It's really interesting the kind of evil that Jesus lists, too. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. There's all sorts of sins. There's all sorts of evil. Note what's not on the list. Idolatry is not on the list. Breaking oaths made to God, not on the list. Jesus is talking about social sins, the things that hurt other people. If it's adultery, if it's murder, that's hurting other people directly. But the interior stuff, the greed, the malice, the deceit, that's hurting people emotionally, right? Jesus is concerned about how humans are treating each other, and that's the source of uncleanliness. Jesus says, look, y'all trying to trap me, that is evil. That's not just uncleanliness, right? We can have a conversation talking about washing hands. I feel like Jesus is probably in favor of washing hands, right? Like, gross, don't not wash your hands. But Jesus is not in favor of being trapped. And Jesus is not in favor of us using principles to hurt other people, to trap folks, to make them look silly. That's not what it's about. And Jesus says, look, the things that are coming out of your mouth are evil, and that leads to impurity. Washing your hands and rules saying you got to wash your hands are a good idea. There's nothing wrong with that. But when those rules become traps to ensnare people, they have to be escaped. The same way the palace has to be escaped. Nothing wrong with the palace, But if you're forced there against your will, get out. Nothing wrong with washing your hands, but if it's a means to hurt people, get out. Jesus is calling folks to freedom beyond rules, right? Like, don't abandon the rules, to be sure, but don't get trapped by them either. And don't use them, more importantly, to trap other people. The evil that Jesus is concerned about is evil that harms other people. So deceit, malice, lewdness. If you are using freedom to hurt other people, to deceive them, to make them less safe, to harm people, to assert your own priorities over other folks, that's envy, that's greed. No, that is not the good stuff. Jesus is saying you can commit evil all the time and be doing the right thing and living in freedom, right? But if you're hurting other people, if you're neglecting caring for other people, it's evil. I just want to say really quickly that Jesus is not against the law. As the book of James is going to tell us, every good and perfect gift comes from above, and that includes the perfect law. This perfect law grants freedom to those who continue to do it. The freedom that Jesus calls us to is not antinomianism. We do not get to abandon the law. That is not what Jesus following is about. Read the Gospels. Jesus cares very strongly that people follow the law. And not just the 10 Commandments. What are the 2 greatest laws? They're from Leviticus and Deuteronomy. What we don't want to use the law to do is trap other people. If we seek to ridicule, if we seek to undermine, if we seek to harm, we're doing the wrong thing. And it doesn't even matter if the law's on our side. We need freedom from hurting other folks and being hurt by other folks. And that's the freedom that Jesus is calling us to. Jesus moves us towards freedom. Jesus moves us towards freedom from even good things that are used by others to trap folks. In the process of moving towards freedom, Jesus warns strongly about doing things to harm or deceive other people. If we are not looking out for our neighbor's well-being all the time, Jesus calls that evil, a misuse of freedom. We are our siblings' keepers, and we follow Jesus, who died to save everybody else. Okay, thanks for watching this week. As always, any feedback, any compliments or criticisms, let me know. Write it down below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye.